Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Spann Report podcast. I'm your host, Mr. Spann, and this is a casual conversation on the report, man. And right now, I got one of my sisters, one of my longtime sisters, joining me for this casual conversation. And we got some pretty, I want to say, some pretty heavy stuff to talk about, but I want to use this episode to kind of talk about some issues dealing with women and hopefully educating the brothers on these women issues and how men are affecting these women, not necessarily knowing that they're doing it, and kind of educating themselves on what to do, what not to do, as far as like street harassment and domestic violence. We're going to talk a lot about that on today's episode of the Casual Conversation. But before we get started, let me introduce my sister, Ayana. How you doing, sister?
I'm all right. How are you today?
You know I'm good. You know I'm good.
Right.
Now, we go way back. We go back a while. And it was interesting. It was interesting to me because I of course, I deal in, social media and podcasting and everything else. And I've been coming across a lot of, mentions of street harassment. And there was a group that we were both a part of where I posed the question of, to the women, what their idea of street harassment was. And you didn't know what it was, or you didn't know the terminology for it. Like, how would you now define street harassment after having some time to look over the subject?
Well, based upon what I researched after not having heard that term or seen the hashtag on Twitter, my understanding that street harassment was where dudes are just coming at women on in a sexual nature, just about anywhere, and it's basically making ladies feel uncomfortable. I guess it's not just limited to the United States or within the states, but I guess that that's pretty much of what I've got as far as what it is today.
Okay,
but it's definitely nothing new.
It's definitely nothing new. What was have you? Of course, I'm thinking you've dealt with that before, though.
Yeah, I think every woman has had, I think one of the resources I read said stuff like, men blowing horns or whistling or shouting, innuendos, at women. Of course, we've all had that. We've been to Belle Isle,
Right.
we've heard that, all before. But I guess in some ways you take it in stride. I don't think it's happened to me in a very, very long time, but and sometimes you take it in stride, and other times it is a little bit edgy or on the line of harassment, especially when it's something that you don't really want, or if you're just not feeling that person, like, look, leave me alone. So I can see where it could be misconstrued, as harassment as well.
Okay. What was your scariest experience with that? Like, has anybody ever really done anything like completely over the top or out of line coming at you?
I think the scariest experience probably I had was maybe someone following me, like, back to my job and
What?
yeah, this was a long time ago, like maybe 2000. This was before before I even came into the OES. So this was way before that. Otherwise, I would have had some brothers on top of him. But I think, yeah, somebody followed me from like way out, like Grosse Point, somewhere. We were at Big Boy or something like that, and he followed me all the way back to my job on the west side. Like, I don't even remember where it was, 7 Mile or something, but Wyoming or something like that. And yeah, I think my maintenance guys kind of roughed him up outside, like, hold on, bro, But I think that's probably the worst that I've ever had. It was scary though, like, to know that, is he gonna follow me home? Is he laying in the cut or, Yeah,
Right.
it's scary. It is scary.
Yeah. Now, like I alluded to before, that like I brought this subject up on in our Facebook group,
Right.
And I also was talking to, like, I was at like a little social gathering. One of my boys had a party at his crib, and we were talking. Just I'm just making conversation and whatnot. And there were some women there, and I pretty much kind of broached the subject with them as to, what their idea of street harassment was, and what did they consider street harassment from a man, and they didn't know what I was talking about. And so my question is, because I see this a lot on Twitter, and I also see this a lot on podcasts. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and the subject comes up, because there aren't a lot of women that I know who are familiar with the term. Do you think that because women aren't familiar with this term, that there's a lot of dudes that don't really recognize that they're performing harassment of women, so to speak?
I don't know if it's that they don't know or they don't care. I
Mm,
think our society has just changed so much just in the last, we could say 10 years. That would put me like 20 something. We could even say 20 years. Like our society, our culture, everything we do has changed so much and so drastically. It's like nowadays dudes really don't care. So whether they know they're harassing a woman, I don't know. But do they care
mm.
is the bigger question to me. That's the bigger question. Do they really care? Yeah.
I would say the vast majority just feel as if they're playing the law of averages in some type of misguided way. It's almost one of those things to where like they feel like, well, somebody's going to say yes eventually. Somebody's going to respond
Yeah.
to, whatever it is that they're putting out. But I guess moving forward, it was another thing that I wanted to talk to you about.
Well,
And
wait, before you move forward, let me
mm,
say this. This thought just popped in my mind. I think it depends on how a woman carries herself as well. Because you're right. If a man's playing a law of averages and he just hitting every chick, just thinking, okay, I'm going to get one, based upon maybe how that girl carries herself, it may encourage him to go after that type of woman more often than a woman that may be a little bit more refined,
mm,
or a little more reserved looking. She could be ratchet as all get out, but she could, appear more reserved. And then you might have a chick that may look a little bit more loose, that could be on the flip side, more reserved. And I think they go toward that more so than someone who doesn't look like that. So I think it could just be based on perceptions as well.
okay. Now that's interesting that you would say that, like, cause um, it's almost like a lot of times folks get into trouble when they say like we get into this respectability, the respectability politics of how a person is perceived and how they should be treated and everything else. And some would say, just based on what you just said, that like some would frame that as if you were saying that it was almost a woman's fault for like she's attracting this type of attention through her actions. How would you
No,
respond to that? You don't think
no.
so?
I mean, none of us deserve it. None of
Yeah.
us deserve it. However, I mean, there are certain things that you can do that draw attention to yourself. So I think that yeah, and case in point, I can speak on myself.
Okay.
Pre 2005, pre breast reduction, where my breasts were a lot more huger, than they are now. So,
I
and
want to
back
go
then
talk
my
about
mind,
that.
no, but I know that wasn't grammatically correct, but just putting it out there. Some of the things that I wore, some of the things that I did, some of the places that I went got me a lot more attention than it did if I had on something a little bit more conservative, or I wasn't showing cleavage or whatever have you. I got it. There was a difference. So if I'm at work and I'm dressed up professionally, no, I'm not getting that same treatment. But if I'm at a cabaret and I got on something provocative, I'm gonna get more attention. That's just, to me, that's just how it goes. So I don't think a woman deserves it because she's drawing attention to herself. But at the same time, if you don't want that attention, then don't do something that would get it.
Okay. Now, segue. when you talk about, one and that type of course, we know Stephen A. For some of the things that he had to say about domestic violence and a woman's role in preventing domestic violence. When you first heard Stephen A.'s comments, what was your first impression?
My first impression is that I totally agree with Stephen A. And I know
Mm.
that I'm probably in the minority and folks will come for me and say whatever they want to say, but I totally agree with Stephen A. I've always held that viewpoint that a woman should not put her hands on a man. I think he went a step further to say, the domestic violence is wrong either way, and a man shouldn't put his hands on a woman. We all know that. That's like, rule number one. That's like man law 101.
Mm.
Don't put your hands on a woman. That's one of the first things that a boy is taught. Don't hit the girls in school. So that goes without saying. But on the flip side, women, we're not taught to not put our hands on a man. And I think that when I heard Stephen A., I agreed wholeheartedly with him. Should he have apologized? I don't know. I guess there's some things you got to do when you're in the corporate realm. I don't think he should have been suspended. But yeah, I totally agree with him. We don't have any right to put our hands on a man, knowing that a man is stronger than you, knowing that you don't know where his mind is, his frame of mind is, not knowing, what's going on in his head right at that moment, and you choose to haul off and slap a dude. To me, just an open invitation to get touched. That's what that
Mm.
is for me.
Yeah. Um. Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, because like I can remember like just growing up with my mother. Where I find myself in a situation with the woman, a physical situation with the woman, what my reaction should be, what my actions should be, and it was interesting to me to get from my mom. She told me don't, to try to avoid those situations at all costs. But if a woman goes so far as to put her hands on you, she's no longer respecting you as a man, and you should check her as such. Meaning, like my mom was on some like, yo, well, not knock her out, but like, yo, meet force with force type shit. And it was what fucked me up about that though, because like even that's like I'm 16 when we having this conversation. What fucked me up about that was I can remember when I was 5 years old, and my brother's dad had put his hands on my mama, and I can remember like not knowing all of the specifics as to what was going on with that situation. I just remember going to the hospital with my grandmother to go pick my mom up, and my mom's got a neck brace on, and both her eyes are black, and that stuck with me. So like for her to say that, I was like, seriously, like my mom, this is what my mother was telling me, and I remember like even at 5 wanting to beat the shit out of my brother's dad. Like I carried that. I carried that till that man passed away. Like I told him, I said, dude, if I ever get into a position to where I can, I'm fucking you up. As at 5 years old,
Right.
like I'm thinking that, to like not put my hands on a woman, and like I thought of my brother's father as less than a man because of what he did to my mom. So it was interesting to me to hear my mother tell me that if a woman puts her hands on me, that I should meet force with force. How often, like, how prevalent do you think that attitude is, or to like to tell a young man, or mothers telling young men that it's okay in that instance to where if a woman attacks you, then you have the right to go ahead and hit a woman?
I honestly don't know. I have a son as well. I don't think it's ever been an issue for my son, but I think I would tell my son the same thing. Um, I grew up the same way. I grew up with, where my mom was abused physically by a boyfriend, and then my sister, in the same boat. And I've endured it, a time or two. um, in a few relationships that I've had. So I mean, I'm like your mom, yet and still, I would say there are some women out here who really do feel like they are mannish enough to go after a man. And I think that that is wrong. I think, you have to remember, we have to remember that we are ladies first. And we shouldn't be put in a situation where, you know, we feel like we want to fight, we want to fight a man.
Mm.
Like to me, it just shouldn't be like that. I mean, we're not talking about, that, that, I don't know, I wouldn't call it proverbial, but like that common, slap that you see the wife give the husband, when he done did something wrong, that one slap or whatever, when when he's overstepped that line and that boundary, you
Mm-hmm.
know. I'm not talking about that. Like I'm talking about straight up fighting. I've seen some people, some chicks, straight up go after a guy and want to just fight him, like a dude on the street, just fight a guy. And I don't think that's right. I think that we need to fall back. We really we really need to fall back on that, because then my thing is, if you do overstep that and you get in this man's face, and let's just say that he's not one of those guys that's going to put up with that, and he does hit you back, now you want to scream, oh, I'm a woman, I'm a girl, and call the police, and he shouldn't have did that. You can't have, to me, you like negate that. That whole argument's out the window. You ruin that defense, so yeah, I don't know what Ray Rice did to that lady, but I mean, I'm sure she didn't deserve to be knocked out cold, but at the same time, we don't even know what happened inside the elevator. We don't know. We just know the doors open. She was on the floor. So we don't know what happened. So I don't it's tricky. It's tricky.
Yeah.
It's tricky because you don't want to come across as somebody that's supporting it. I think every time I kind of go against the grain, which is quite often, that.
Mm-hmm.
Every time I go against the grain, it's like somebody feels like I'm supporting it. So I'm not supporting men and domestic violence. I'm absolutely not supporting that. But I'm also not supporting women committing domestic violence against men, which happens and goes unnoticed. It's like, why do we get a pass? I don't know. Maybe that's just the thing that women get passed on, just like there's some things men get a pass on. I don't know.
Yeah. Now, of course, you already said that you didn't necessarily agree with the fact that Stephen A. Smith was suspended this week because of his statements about the domestic violence or whatever. Whoopi Goldberg went on The View and voiced her support in what Stephen A. was saying. At least try to, I guess, give some understanding or whatever of what it was Stephen A. to listen to that to listen to that segment on The View. And for all of you guys that are listening to this right now, I'll have that video available. Check that out for yourself. But it was interesting to hear her talk about that and to hear all of the applause coming from that's a mostly female audience that watches The View. So to hear her, she was met with some pushback by the panel, but to hear her say what she said and she was met with applause for what she said, I don't think she's facing any suspension for what she said on The View. Do you think that because she's a woman that the message was received better because of who she is, as opposed to it being another man condoning or explaining away an instance of domestic violence? Do you think it was because of who she is as a woman that ideal was more palatable to the audience?
You know what? At first I was going to say, no, I don't think so. But then you have to consider the different audience. Like you said, the audience there is predominantly women, and probably the viewer audience is probably predominantly women. Whereas on First Take, it's interesting that he did get suspended, because it would seem to me that the audience on First Take would be predominantly men. I watch First Take, but I'm a little different, with the sports. So that's quite interesting. But whether or not the message was received any differently, actually I don't think so. I think people will probably give her the same amount of backlash, and whoever these feminist groups are, whoever the lady was, I think some lady that, made the big deal about Stephen A. Smith and his comments, I think that she'll probably have the same um, the same sentiment for Whoopi, just like the panel or the rest of the co-hosts, felt the same way. But I think Whoopi gets it. Like she truly gets it. Domestic violence is something that has gone. There's so many things in our culture specifically that's just gone unspoken for so many years, and I just don't understand for the life of me why, when these things are brought to the forefront, it's just like, someone's suspended by it, or, everybody's offended. Everybody's playing defense, and there's no, even when there's no offense, there's somebody's playing defense. And it's like, when you bring light to a problem, that's when you can come up with a solution, I commend Stephen A. Smith for what he said, and I also commend Whoopi Goldberg for saying what she said, because I think it's something that needs to be told. Domestic violence shouldn't be happening one way or the other, whether it's woman on man or man on woman, or woman on woman, man on man, however you want to put it. It shouldn't be happening. Period.
Yeah. Bottom line, people really should keep their hands to their fucking self.
Yeah, keep your hands to yourself.
But like with with Stephen A. Like I think what happened with Stephen A. was that he was trying to bring a nuanced discussion on the fly. He didn't necessarily know how to articulate that discussion. But do you think that, with ESPN silencing him for a week, that they missed an opportunity to have a real discussion, like especially with First Take, because that's their debate show and that's where they talk about issues, and of course they talk about sports primarily, but this is something that stemmed from a sports story. And it's funny that this whole thing stemmed from what Ray Rice did, and a lot of folks aren't even really talking about Ray Rice anymore. They're talking about Stephen A. But do you think that they missed an opportunity to have a real discussion about this by silencing Stephen A.? And I've even heard some folks say that they pretty much neutered his future commentary. Like, he won't be as, I guess, edgy as they would like for Stephen A. to be. Do you think that ESPN might have missed an opportunity to have a real discussion about, domestic violence as it relates to sports, as it relates to just American life, period? Do you think they missed an opportunity to have a real discussion about that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think ESPN is definitely missing an opportunity, especially when it relates to sports, because this is something that has happened in sports, even if it's not a relationship type of thing, but we've seen it. Remember Tiger Woods, and we've seen this before. And yes, it's an opportunity to put it out there and have the discussion, so that we can bring some solution to the table. I think Stephen A. is way out of his element on First Take. I mean, I guess he's great, at the sports thing, but I think he has so much more to offer to life than what ESPN can give him. I would really like to see him in a Tavis Smiley type of show, something like that, where he can just let it be free. Because he has so much more to offer to us than just on the sports tip. And I think I hope that it doesn't change his future commentaries. I hope that he still brings it, because to me, you need people that's truthful, and honest with everyone. We have enough reality shows that's fake. We really need some realness, in our life. We have enough of that.
Yeah. Okay. We're gonna move on to another portion of this. Yeah, we're gonna move on to another portion of this. It's enough Stephen A. Have you? You alluded to it earlier, but I wanted to ask, have you had any instances of domestic violence with you that you witnessed or that happened to you that you were comfortable sharing here?
I've had both. I've witnessed it, like I said, within my own family, and I probably won't share their stuff. I won't
Mm,
air their dirt, but I've been in relationships before, or one relationship where it did result in domestic violence. Actually, it was not that long ago.
mm.
um, where and I have a zero tolerance for it. Basically, my rule is you put your hands on me, I'm done. Like, you only get one time to do that, and I'm out of there. I don't have time for that kind of heartache in my life. So, yeah, I mean, this guy, had been drinking. He was upset that I had planned to move on from the relationship, and um, again, he had been drinking. We got into like a petty argument about the oil spill. Wait, that oil spill that happened like in 2010, and it was on CNN, and I was watching CNN per usual, and yeah, he picked me up out of the bed, like physically picked me up out of the bed and slammed me like to the floor.
Wow.
So, that was like, for me, it was just like, you know what, I'm done. I think my son called the police, and they came, and I don't think, did they arrest him? I think they did take him. I think they did.
Mm,
And I think he did, spend overnight in jail thinking about that situation. And pretty much, like I said, I was out of there anyway. And so in a few days or whatever, I think he came back, and he never returned back to the house. He ended up finding another place or staying with someone else or
mm.
whatever have you, and we ended up moving. But at the end of it all, it was like, we were amicable, at the end of it all. But we knew we were done.
Yeah.
We knew we were done. So, yeah, that's just one of the few instances. I think I've only ever had it happen one other time, and I probably won't share that one. But um, yeah, I'm pretty much out of there. I don't really have that much patience and tolerance for that. Just growing up, seeing that, it's just not something that I want to do. It's not something that I want to be involved with whatsoever.
Yeah. Uh, I remember the first time I saw a man physically hit a woman. I was about 8. I think I was about 8, and it was at the babysitter's house. Like, my mom left us with the lady next door. Name was Ann, and Ann had this boyfriend named Joe. His name was Joe, and like we over there, me and my brother, we over there, and we just, it's right next door, so it's like, our house is still open. We going back and forth to the
Right, you can
house or
go back
whatever.
and forth.
Right, so we right next door or whatever. But I remember they were like play fighting. It was like it started off as like they were playing, and I remember like Joe saying he didn't want to do, like he kind of like, all right, I'm done, I'm done, and she kept, like, come on, come on, come on, and he's like, look, lady, get the fuck off me, like, like,
I'm
stop,
done.
like, I'm done, like I told you I'm done, and she kept on, and like then he just kind of hauled off and like punched her. Like he punched her, like I told you, leave me the fuck alone. Like his whole attitude flipped. It wasn't like a it wasn't like it was like gradual. Like this whole thing happened within the span of like maybe 30 seconds. Like his whole attitude just like flipped, and he punched her, and then they got to fighting. And I remember going back, like me, I grabbed my brother, and we went back home, and we called my mom at the job. Was like, no, we're not going back over there. And like my mom came home, and like, she's like, all right, I got to find something else to do. I can't leave y'all over there. But that was like the first time I saw a man physically engage a woman in that way, like personally, like experience, like visualize it, and like, and even then I was like, God damn, like it, something about that whole thing seemed off as shit to me, even though like he was, in the whole thing of like leave me alone and everything else. as a child, as an 8-year-old boy, I'm looking at that like he ain't have to hit her like that.
Yeah, no,
As
I agree.
as an 8-year-old kid, I knew that like that was fucked up. And, like he didn't have to do that, and that shit bothered me. Like I was like, no, mom, we can't go back over there. And I told my mama that, and she was like, okay. And she never sent us back over there. But then I think about this between me and my daughter's mom. This was when, like, I wasn't nowhere near where I thought I could put it that way. Like, I had just moved from Chicago to Detroit. None of the before I moved from Detroit to Chicago, I hadn't contacted. I had no contact with none of my friends and none of my people here. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just me and my like I know all of my girls' people. Like I knew my daughter's mom's people. That was it. Right? And like I'll never forget. Like this was like back in the back. So I'm in the like news. I do news articles. I used to, I'm in forums and stuff like that. That's what I was using Black Planet for. She thought I was using Black Planet to get at chicks, right? Because that's what all of her friends told her what Black Planet was. Like, you go on Black Planet to get at females or whatnot.
Yeah, so, I know about Black Planet.
Right. So she comes at me about the Black Planet stuff, and I was telling her, like, well, look, this is what I'm using it for. I could show you my page. I talk about nothing but you and I on my page on Black Planet, She wasn't trying to hear none of that stuff. So she's coming at me, she's poking her finger in my face, she's poking me in the chest and everything. And like she hit me. She hit me a couple times. And I remember that conversation that I had with my mom when I was 16 years old, and my mom was like, you meet force with force. And I'm thinking to myself, nah, I can't do that. My daughter's standing right there.
Right.
My daughter's standing right there, and I don't want her thinking that that's how that this is something normal. That I don't want her ever thinking that this is something, or this is the type of thing that she should expect when she's dealing with a man. That's the biggest thing for me, is that I don't want her ever to think that that's what she should expect from a man and how she's supposed to deal with it. And even then, like, it took all the restraint in the world.
Yeah.
All the restraint in the world not to do it. I wanted to. I didn't do it. I knew that meant nothing but trouble for me. And so I think about that, man. I think about that a lot, man. Like when I talk to a lot of guys, man, you hear a lot of guys talk about what they would do in a situation where a woman's hitting them. You hear a lot of out of these world scenarios, like, well, what if she got a gun on you and all this other shit. But at the end of the day, I think that restraint, like practicing that restraint, I think was big. Being a Mason probably had a lot to do with that, because I was subduing some passions right there.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So, that was one of those things to where, like, that whole situation could have ended a whole hell of a lot worse. And it could have pretty much altered my entire relationship with my daughter. It could have altered, like, a whole hell of a lot of shit could have changed in that very moment had I, like, if I'd have just punched her or whatever it was. I could have did it, a whole hell of a lot of things, but I didn't. Just leave me alone. That's all I want. That's all a man wants in his house is some peace. That's all a real man wants in his house. It's some motherfucking peace, man.
And I think, you know what? I think that at the end of it all, it's really not about, like, it's, even though your mom told you that, like, at the end of the day, it's really not about that. It really goes back to 101, to where a man really should not put his hand on a woman. And in my opinion, there is always a way that he can mitigate, or de-escalate that situation without punching her in the face. You can walk away, you can maybe just grab her arms, like, look, chill out, like with your babysitter. Like, he didn't have to punch her. He could have just grabbed her, like, look, I ain't playing with you no more, and been a little bit more firm, that way, or sat her on the couch, or anything, like, A man should always try to find a way to de-escalate or mitigate the situation so that it doesn't, end up in violence. But I mean, I guess it's just really a fine line because where do you draw that? Is she coming at you, with some haymakers, or is she doing like what your daughter's mother did, a couple of taps here where you want to really lash out at her, but at the same time you're looking at the surrounding, and you making a better decision. So I think we have to make better decisions, just period. We have to make a better decision. I mean, a man should. I mean, a man's always stronger than a woman. I mean, that's just the way that we were made. So he should always be able to find a way to handle the situation without really just having to knock a chick out or, or blowing her mouth out, as we would say. But
right,
yeah, should be a way. And kudos to your restraint, because I probably would have wanted to fire on her.
Now, you were talking about you've had conversations about these things with your son, haven't you?
You know what? Not specifically. My son was a fighter back in his school days. Thank God he has graduated. But my son's pretty like antisocial, so I really didn't have too many of those issues. He's never had a quote unquote girlfriend yet. I keep asking like, what's going on, bro? But he's just not he's not in that frame of mind. He's into games and stuff like that. Like chicks, that's not him. That's not where his head is at. He's into his games and his computers and stuff like that. So I've never really had to have that conversation. I'm sure one day it's gonna come. I'm sure one day it will come. Down to, and I think he did have some instances in middle school with a few girls, and I had to tell him like, look, don't put your hands on the girls. But see, my thing was don't put your hands on nobody. He was so OC that I was just like, dude, just stop touching people. Period. Don't touch nobody. If I had to go back to this school one more time. So yeah. I'm sure it'll come. It'll come. And I'll say exactly how I feel. I have to be straight up about it. I have to be straight. I would like for him not to do it, Definitely I would like for him not to do it, but I don't want him to be in a situation where he feels threatened. No one talks about whether or not a man feels threatened. I mean, who's to say a man couldn't feel threatened by a chick? Who's to say? So it really depends on what the situation is, and who knows? I don't know. Do you guys feel threatened? Do you think it's possible for a man to feel threatened by a woman who's coming at him violently?
I can say that I've never felt threatened by like a woman, even if she's, being real extra, even if she's being real aggressive and everything. I've never felt threatened to the point to where I feel like I have to defend myself or anything. Like I've never felt that. Like there's never been a thing to where like, yo man, I might have to knock this bitch out. Like, it's never been that. Like, and even when in that instance with my daughter's mom, it was like, I just need her to just leave me the fuck alone.
Just get out of my face. Yeah.
Like that was it. Like I've never felt, any sense. But that's not to say that no guy has never felt that way. I mean, I don't. Even if they did, like even like my boys or whatever, even if they did, I don't know if they would tell me. They may frame that whole conversation, they may frame that whole scenario in a different way to justify what it is that they did.
Yeah.
So like I would never really know how another guy felt in that situation. He may feel like his manhood is being challenged, or he may even be laughed at because of how he felt in that situation. He may not be comfortable sharing that with a lot of folks. And I think, sometimes that plays a role too, to where guys is, feeling like they have to validate their machismo to where like, nah man, like I fuck that bitch, like and they and they feel like they have to do that just to validate who they are as a man with other men, So I can say that I've never actually felt threatened in that way, but I can't say if a guy never has. I'm pretty sure there has, but we don't hear about those dudes. They don't really speak up as often, so to speak. Like you very rarely hear a guy talk about how threatened he was in a situation with the woman.
Mm-hmm.
You just don't really hear about it, even if it's happening that way. So, yeah. I mean,
and that leads to provocation too. I think Stephen A. was talking about, or a lot of folks were talking about how Stephen A. was saying that, she was justified, or a woman, shouldn't provoke a man, or a man is justified in acting out if a woman is provoking a man. And I think, just any provocation, I think, is unnecessary. And I've seen chicks, before in the heat of the moment that just, is so extra, and the man's like backing them down. And and I think I've even done it before where I went right up to that line, where, it's just like, and it's like, chill out, have a seat, and you're like, and he's steady backing you back, but you're steady moving forward, and you hit that line, like you hit that wall, and we have to understand that, everybody has a threshold, just as a human being. So you have to know, when to back down. You have to know that. And ego plays a lot into it. Like you said, the machismo plays a lot into it, and so does a woman's ego. And I think our egos have been transformed over the past few generations to where, with the disintegration of our families and men not being a part of our household regularly, like our egos as women have transformed in something that takes on a little bit more of a masculine tone, because we've had to be quote unquote independent. I don't like that term, but we've had to carry a household, so to speak, by ourselves for so long that now we have these thoughts that, where we kind of think, more so in a masculine way. So when that's going on and you're in the heat of the moment and everything is going, it's like our egos kick in a masculine sense more so like in a feminine sense, and we just keep going and going and going. And we have to look at that. We have to look at that. So, and then they say didn't they say the wife, well, the now wife of Ray Rice, she got sentenced too, because she admitted to either provoking or violence as well.
Well, I haven't heard anything about her being sentenced to anything. As a matter of fact, the only discipline that I think anybody had been handed down was Ray Rice with his suspension, his 2-game suspension.
Let's see.
That was the only discipline I think anybody got in that whole scenario, was the fact that he was suspended 2 games, and that I think that's the equivalent of a few $1,000s for him. I don't think she saw any like legal actions against her at all. No, I don't. At least none that I'm aware.
I heard that there was, but I don't know. I'm gonna look over here real quick. But yeah, I heard that there was, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've come to our time, sis.
Uh-oh.
We've come to our time.
Hang that up.
We've come to our time.
All right.
Let everybody know how they can get in touch with you if they want to have a meaningful conversation with Sister Ayana.
Well, if they want to have a meaningful conversation with me, I guess the best way to get with me would be on Facebook. I have a Facebook page, which is the Beautiful Bling Lady. That's it probably would be www.facebook.com/LS by Ayana, Ayana. Or you could just add me on Facebook, search me, Ayana Weaver. I don't mind. I'll add you. We can have some conversation. Add me to a group. I'll have offline conversation. It is what it is.
All right, sis. I really do appreciate you sitting down and having this conversation with me. And I'll talk to you again soon.
All right. Peace out.
All right.
Bye.